It's a new year, and that means new books and endless reading possibilities. My favourite point of the year is sitting down right at the beginning and deciding what I would like to read, theming my reading, thinking about new authors I want to try and ways I want to challenge myself as a reader. And this is my classics I want to read in 2024 video. Filming my classics I want to read video really has become a yearly tradition for me, and I hope that this video will inspire you to read some more classics this year, just as it inspires me with my own classics reading. So let's look at what I have planned for 2024, and there's one author that I am almost definite will come to define my year this year. She's become a new favourite of mine, an author I read for the first time in 2023, and I am obsessed. It's an obsession I can't see going anywhere anytime soon. It's just gonna keep going, and I'm here for it. So the author I want to read first in 2024 is Agatha Christie. I really am becoming somewhat of a mystery girl, but the problem with reading Agatha Christie is that I think I'm a detective now. I think I'm Miss Marple. I think I can outwit Poirot. It's becoming a problem because every new mystery I read, my confidence grows and I'm becoming slightly delusional. So with my Agatha Christie reading, I am trying to read the Miss Marple books vaguely in publication order. I'm reading the Poirot books out of order and then reading the standalones whenever I feel like it. So I'm trying to read a range of her books because I do think that there are differences depending on when she wrote them. Some books just naturally are better than others. She wrote so many books that there are going to be some that are hit or miss and others that she is most known for. So the book I want to kick my Agatha Christie reading off with this year is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which many say is her best book. Not just her best loved, but her best crafted too. And one of you lovely people left a comment on my last video which said that really you should read Agatha Christie's best books first, because the more you read, the more you know her tricks and what she's doing. So if you read the best books first, then you can enjoy them more and really see them for what they are and how good they are. And I've really taken that to heart. This was published in 1926, so it's one of Agatha Christie's earlier mysteries, and it is a Poirot book. And I've read one other Poirot book so far, which was The Murder on the Orient Express, and while I loved it, I didn't enjoy it quite as much as some of the standalone Agatha Christie I've read. So I'm really interested to know how I find Poirot in this book. What I've found so far with Poirot is that he likes the sound of his own voice, which fair enough, it's his book, he is the main character, he's the detective solving the mystery. But because of that, Agatha Christie has these moments where he's showing how clever he is, and I find that that detaches me from his character slightly because it's just annoying. It rubs me up the wrong way. I'm hoping to read this one in the next few weeks, so hopefully it will be just as good as everybody says. Another Agatha Christie book I would like to read this year is Death on the Nile, and this is also a Poirot book. It was one that was written over a decade after The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, so I think it will be interesting to read them sort of back to back and compare the decade development in Christie's writing style and where she was taking the stories and the characters. I'm really excited about this one because I think that Agatha Christie does setting really well. I love the way that she writes about place and how she includes place in the setup for the murder that has taken place. This is set on a cruise steamer that is going down the Nile, and Poirot is on this cruise steamer, and of course a murder has happened and we know that somebody on this boat is the murderer, so it's Poirot's job to solve who it is. I'm wondering how similar it will be to Murder on the Orient Express, because those two do sound very similar, except we've got a cruise steamer going down the Nile and a train. So hopefully there'll be some difference, but I think it's going to be quite a clever one. While I fully expect that I'll read a lot more Agatha Christie this year, the final Agatha Christie book I would definitely love to read is Sparkling Cyanide, which is one of the standalone mysteries. So there isn't a specific detective involved in the solving of the crime that has taken place. The premise of this revolves around a dinner party for 6, but there are 7 places at the table, and everybody in attendance is very aware that just a year before they were in exactly the same position, where a woman called Rosemary died at the table and the 7th place is empty but laid for her. This sounds right up my street, and it's one that's included in a lot of best of Agatha Christie lists. Away from Agatha Christie, and an author unrelated but who was writing at the same time, is Virginia Woolf, and I've read quite a few of her novels, which I love. I'm a big Virginia Woolf fan. When I read a Virginia Woolf, I try to carve out as much time as possible and read the book in as few sittings as I possibly can, because that's my favourite Virginia Woolf reading experience. But I came to this realisation that I haven't read as much non-fiction from Virginia Woolf as possible. I've read A Room of One's Own, but there's so much of her writing that I still haven't got to, so I thought that this year I would focus on trying to read some more Virginia Woolf non-fiction. And the book that I've gone for is The Common Reader. This is volume 1, so I'll try to read this and hopefully the other volume if I can. So this is a collection of essays from the perspective of the common reader, readers from across the ages, and each essay looks at literature spanning a broad range of history. Just looking through, we can see essays on Chaucer, on Elizabethan plays, on modern fiction, lives of the obscure, Jane Austen, Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, all things that I really love, and I always really respect Virginia Woolf's opinion as a writer and also as a critic, and this really was what established her as a literature critic. I don't know yet if I'll read this all in one go or if I'll break the essays down and read them over a longer period of time, but either way I'm really looking forward to it and hoping it inspires some of my own reading too. Another non-fiction classic I would like to read this year is Night Walks by Charles Dickens, and this is in Penguin's Great Ideas series. So this is another collection of essays about Charles Dickens' musings on the night walks around London he went on. And though I think this is going to be a great insight into Charles Dickens' mind, what I'm probably most excited about with this book is looking at what Victorian London was like. So actually walking around Victorian London with Charles Dickens as a tour guide. I think everybody would like Charles Dickens as a tour guide, right? Whereas Virginia Woolf wrote about the common reader, Ian Forster did a series of lectures about aspects of the novel, and it was turned into an essay collection too. So we've gone from reading to the art of writing, and what I really like about the idea of reading this alongside Virginia Woolf is that it talks about rejecting the historical view of criticism, that demon of chronology as Ian Forster called it, that considers writers in terms of the period in which they wrote and instead asks us to imagine the great novelists at work together in a circular room. So it's looking at writers not just in context of the time that they were writing, but looking at them in relation to each other, learning from each other and building on what already has been done. I've read extracts from this before, but it's going to be great to read it all in one go. I am somewhat of an E.M. Forster fan. Howard's End is one of my favourite books of all time. I'm a big fan of Morris too. I wasn't quite as much of a fan of A Room with a View, which was the first Ian Forster book that I read, but I would like to continue with his novels, and this year I think I should give A Passage to India a go. Look at this lovely orange Penguin paperback. I love these editions so much. This is a book that's set during the British rule of India and was heavily inspired by Ian Forster's own time in India during the 1910s, so it's going to have heavy themes of empire and colonialism, and I think it's going to be important to read it in the context of the time it was written, but I also think it's equally as important to critique it based on who we are and the world that we live in now. For those of you who don't know, I am currently studying for a degree in history, and my module this year is based on war in Europe during the 20th century. So I've looked at the First World War, the Second World War, and I'm going right up to the Cold War. So some of the books I want to read this year have been heavily inspired by the reading that I've done so far and things that have piqued my interest as I have been studying. An author we looked at as part of our module reading was Christopher Isherwood, and these are his Berlin novels. So they start with Mr. Norris Changes Trains and Goodbye to Berlin. And these were the inspiration for Cabaret. They are set in Berlin during the interwar years, and it was an era of jazz and exploration and adventure and bright lights and entertainment, but it was also an era of deprivation and struggle, and people were still living in really shocking conditions, despite the fact that elsewhere in the city it very much felt like a new age. Both books were published in the 1930s, and it's very difficult to read the books now and not to want to reach in and tell the characters, I know what's coming. War is on its way. You've lived through one war and there is another right round the corner. Something that wasn't unfelt completely by people at the time, but we know for sure. We know what happens, and the characters, the author doesn't. Based on the extracts I've read so far, I think I'm really going to enjoy this. Another book set in interwar Germany is Manja by Anna Miner, who was Eva Ibbotsson's mother. Eva Ibbotson is one of my favourite authors. If you haven't read her YA/adult novels, they are the absolute best, and I love her children's books too. So I've always wanted to read this, but I thought now would be the perfect time. This is a beautiful Persephone edition. I love their bookshop so much and love the selection of books that they publish. This opens in 1920 and runs up into 1933. I could talk about this all day, but I'll hand you over to the far superior wordsmith of Eva Ibbotson, who said, I remember my mother writing Manja in the sitting room of a flat in Belsize Park. Its origins were a small piece in a newspaper describing the fate of a 12-year-old girl in a German town. The book spans the period between 1920s, when Germans were trying to forget the defeat and horror of the war, and 1933, when the hopes and aspirations of decent people had suffered a second defeat in the triumph of Nazism. The story of 5 children and their loyal and resolute friendship, Manja opens with the 5 nights on which they are conceived. They gradually meet, and only partly understanding, are drawn into the destinies of their parents. I really am looking forward to reading this. For my final year of university, I think I'm going to choose a module on Welsh history, so I thought I would add some Welsh classics to my list this year. I thought I'd go way back in time and read some of the Mabinogion. The book is made up of 11 stories from medieval Wales, and they weren't stories that were written together, but they were stories that were put together and translated into English, and that's how they have ended up together. The stories date between 1382 and 1410, which is not, it's safe to say, my time period. So it's going to be really nice to challenge myself as a reader, and not just because of the language, but because there's going to be so much historical context that I need to get to grips with too. I'm really excited about this. I love a little bit of a challenge, and I know it's going to be a fun challenge. And then finally, I would love this year to be the year that I read some George Orwell. I love these beautiful Penguin English Library editions, and I've wanted to read some George Orwell for years, but I've never got around to it. I don't think that the time has been right. I really do believe that sometimes books find you at the right time, and you weren't meant to read them before because maybe you wouldn't understand them in the right way. Maybe you don't need that book in your life at that point, but I really do feel like now is the right time for George Orwell. So I'd like to read 1984 and Animal Farm. Animal Farm was published first in 1945 and 1984 followed in 1949, and both are extremely political in nature. Animal Farm is the story of a revolution told through the lens of a group of farm animals, and 1984 is about a future society where everything is controlled down to your every thought by the party. It has the iconic opening line, "It was a bright cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. I think it might be quite nice to read these in quick succession and be able to compare the two, so I might try to do that. So those are the classics that I am hoping to read in 2024. I'd love to know in the comments what classics you are hoping to read this year. Share with me your exciting TBR piles. I am sending you all the luck for the reading year ahead. Happy reading!